Oregon Battle of the Books book this time around, and we're going to do a little short reading of it just to get us into the mood and to see if we like the book at all. And then we'll do a couple of polls to talk about it, and it'll be fun. So if you look on your screen, if you move your mouse around, on the bottom there will be some icons that pop up. There's a Q&A and there's a chat. For the Q&A, if you have a question, you can go ahead and type your question into the Q&A and we'll look at that. For the chat, we have it enabled so that you can ask the panelists a question if you would like to. So you can do that as we are going along. And we are probably going to go ahead and get started. My name is Josie. I'm a librarian with Deschutes Public Library. Sheila is here helping me out. Oops. I'm sorry if I accidentally hit the polling. Sheila's helping me out, so if there's anything that she needs to answer questions for or anything like that along the way, she will help you out with that. So I'm going to share my screen, which means you'll see everything that I see on my screen. Before we get started, we're just going to do a quick little look at how to get a hold of one of these books if you're interested. So my face is going to show up. Oops. Okay, Sheila's face is showing up. There we go. Okay, so my face is going to show up there in that little screen, and you can see my web browser. I'm using Chrome right now, but you can use any web browser you want for this. If you're interested in checking out this book electronically on your Chromebook or on your iPad or on your computer at home, it's super easy. You can go to deschuteslibrary.org. That's the web address. And then if you scroll down, there's this big yellow box in the middle that says digital downloads. So if you click on that, you get all of our digital downloads. There's a lot of different things. Today, I'm going to focus on Hoopla. You can get this book, The Changeling, via Overdrive, but I'm going to focus on Hoopla today. So if I click on that, I'm brought to our Hoopla platform. There's tons of book covers in here. You can see all the different things that we have to offer. And you can also search up here in the top box. So if I search, this is a funny one. If I search for Changeling, there are a lot of books called Changeling, so make sure you get the one by William Ritter that has this picture on the front, two boys in blue shirts, because changeling is a pretty common word, and there are a lot of different books with changelings. So I have already checked it out. As many people who want to can check this out all at the same time, so every single person could check it out if they wanted. And here is the book cover. So I want you to just look at that book cover just a teensy bit. It says The Oddmire, Book 1, Changeling, William Ritter. So look at that cover, think about it. I'm going to stop my share here for a second, and we are going to try a poll. So here it is. Judge the book by its cover. I hope everyone can see that poll. Do you think this book will be scary? So we've got yes, way too much. Yes, maybe a little. I'm not sure. Probably no, or definitely no. So I'm hoping that pops up on your screen. Please feel free to throw me something in the chat if it is not popped up on your screen. And feel free to vote. I thought I had it so that, no, I had it so that the panelists can vote, but since we're both co-hosts, Sheila, we cannot vote. So, Joanne, if you're there, feel free to vote. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling there. And let's see. Yeah. Okay. So, I don't know. Sometimes it's just fun to look at a picture and see if it is something scary, see if you have any ideas about it, see if it inspires you or warns you away. You know, sometimes book covers are really good and sometimes they're not so much. So that was our Judge the Book by the Cover poll. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make myself a little small so that you can still tell I'm talking, but so I won't get in the way of the pages. And I'm going to make the Changeling full screen so that we can see everything. And depending on how you switch things around, things will show up a little bit differently depending on the size of the font you have and the size of the screen you have and all that stuff. But we're going to go ahead and get started with Changeling by William Ritter. the dedication and our chapter contents. Now this book begins with a prologue, and you can tell by my screen it does show up a little bit funny with some words coming over each other, but I think we'll be able to survive that. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading. This is Changeling by William Ritter, Prologue. A very long time ago, humans and fairies and elves and dolphins and all the other intelligent beings of the world got sick of one another, which was understandable, as intelligent beings were all pretty much rubbish in those days. After much arguing, they decided to split up the world and build a sort of magical wall between the two halves. On the human side of the barrier, life would be governed by logic and reason and the laws of nature. It would be an honest world of soil and struggle. The other side would be ruled by forces more ancient than any earthly science, a world of magic and madness and raw potential. Humans called their side Earth, and the magical beings called their side of Onwin, all except for the gnomes, who called it Pippin Gilwhipple, which is one of the many reasons that, to this day, nobody from either side cares much for gnomes. For many centuries, the wall stood, a sort of veil between two worlds, invisible but everywhere. Neither side could see or touch the other, and in time, many creatures forgot there was another world at all. This remained the state of things until rogue groups brought their simmering strife to an unruly boil and a new war broke out. As it turned out, intelligent beings were still fairly rubbish, if not properly supervised. The resulting battle blasted a great gaping hole right through the invisible barrier. When the dust settled, some felt that the hole in the wall should be patched back up, and others felt that the barrier should come down entirely. In the hubbub, nobody noticed as the thing that had been inside the wall, the thing that may have been the very soul of the wall, escaped. Nobody was watching as the thing that had spent countless centuries listening at the cracks and growing hungrier and hungrier slipped past the rubble and across the bloody battlefield. Nobody saw it slide quietly into the forest. The thing clutched at shadows as it moved between trees, drawing the darkness around itself like a riding cloak. It had never known sunlight or birdsong or honey-sweet breezes or even the sound of its own name. If the thing even had a name, it had never had anyone speak it. The thing whipped past mossy boulders, through the towering trees, and over the muggy, murky Oddmire. When it reached the very heart of the wild wood, it finally slowed and came to rest. The trees grew more densely there, and the air was still. Even the sound of the birds died away. The shadows here were thick and heavy, and the thing gathered them up greedily. The thing knew shadows. In that sunless, starless place between the worlds, there had been shadows so absolute they had no form. The thing's whole world had been a shadow. Its whole life had been one great shadow, and within it, the thing felt impossibly small. But the shadows in this new place were different. They would do as it bid them. They were powerful, those shadows of stones and boulders and tall pine trees, and the pieces of torn from them felt comfortable as they knit together across the thing's back. The thing felt strong. Beneath its swelling cloak of darkness, the thing began to take on new shapes, bigger shapes, terrible shapes. Still, there was one shadow that caught the thing like a thorn, its own. The creature's meager slip of a shadow followed it, clung to it, taunted it with its own true, trifling form. The creature plunged its talons into the forest floor, and for a time, the only sound was the scratching of unseen claws digging into the soil. When the hole was deep enough, the thing turned its talons on itself. It tore and it ripped until finally, reverently, it lowered its own severed shadow into the cold earth and buried the humble scraps beneath the dirt. All around it, pools of darkness blossomed as if the entire forest floor were a fresh, clean napkin laid over a a seeping ink stain. The darkness grew. The thing drew itself up into its full height and then drew itself up even higher, a little higher and higher still. Countless stolen shadows rippled along its cloak like waves of grain shimmering on a breeze. The thing would be whatever it pleased now. It was never going back. The darkness spreading across the forest floor solidified into angry coils and knots as it grew. Wicked thorns burst from its surface. For just a moment, there was silence and the forest was still. And then the darkness began to creep. Ooh. Okay, so that was our prologue. That was a little snippet of her book. We're going to go ahead and read the second chapter here in just a second, but I wanted to stop and see if anyone had any questions. So again, if you move your mouse or your finger across a touch screen, the Q&A should pop up at the bottom. If you click on the Q&A, you can go ahead and ask a question and we will help you answer it. I'll just wait just a second. So that prologue was really fun. And if you've read a bit of the book, you don't find out what that prologue is talking about until later on. So it's kind of exciting. It's not part of the main beginning part of the book, but we are going to go ahead and that set the stage, but we're going to go into the first act. We're going to go into the start of the book. I'm going to read one chapter and then we have another poll and I will leave the rest of the book for you to read alone, but I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. So I'm going to pull that up, share. And again, we're looking at the book in Hoopla. It's just a browser-based way to look at the book. I am using arrows to turn pages and we'll get, oops, I went backwards, sorry. I'll get us to chapter 1. So the beginning of each chapter has a little picture, and so maybe that can help you guess what the chapter is about. I'm going to go ahead and make myself smaller so I don't get in the way of the text or the words, and I'm going to go ahead and make, oops, this book bigger. It's going to think about it for a second. Again, the way I have it laid out and the size of my text, there's going to be a little bit of overlap. So hopefully I won't mess up the words on that part at all. This is going to be a little bit longer than the prologue. So we'll see if we can get through it in the amount of time that we have. Here we go. This is Changeling by William Ritter, Chapter 1. The town of Ensborough was a quaint community teetering on the edge of what could be only generously termed civilization. A dense forest known by the locals as the Wildwood curled around the town the way a Great Dane might curl around a terrier puppy. A single winding road was all that connected the people of Ensborough to the rest of the world. 2 days' ride on a sturdy horse would take travelers past Cobb's outpost into the crowded city of Glanville, where modernity was all the rage. Gas lamps were on the way out in Glanville, and fancy electric streetlights were on the way in. Quiet Ensborough, meanwhile, had not yet gotten around to gas. Its citizens had adopted the practical habit of going to sleep when the sun went down, and when the sun rose, they rose with it. There was a straightforward simplicity to Ensborough. The town boasted a lumber mill and a coal mine. It had modest apple orchards and more cows than it really needed, if it was being honest. In its middle sat a brick building that served as the schoolhouse on weekdays, the church on Sundays, and the meeting hall on Saturdays. It was a no-nonsense sort of town that heard about notions like technology and progress and decided that they sounded exhausting. Everyone knew the wood was home to monsters, towering giants and trolls and goblins who kidnapped sweet dimpled babies in the dead of night, stealing them away into the forest forever. Daring adventures awaited any hero brave enough to cross that tree line and march into the unknown, which was why the people of Ensborough did not. Ensborough was simply not the sort of town that went looking for trouble. Trouble, however, found its own way to Ensborough. Trouble crept silently out of the wildwood one warm summer night, holding its breath as it tiptoed toward a cottage on the edge of town. Trouble listened outside the back window, waiting patiently until everyone inside was asleep. And then, when it was quite certain it would not be spotted, trouble made its move. Cole tiptoed along the back wall, holding his precious bundle close to his chest as he hurried from shadow to shadow. He meant well, mostly, at least by goblin standards. His pointed ears perked up at every sound, and his jagged teeth ground nervously against one another. It wasn't treason, what he was doing. It was tradition, and it was necessary. True, the goblin chief had commanded that the human world was now strictly off limits. And yes, there had been talk of terrible shame and torture, and something about entrails for any member of the goblin horde who trespassed into the world of men. But the quiet, dark room into which Cole crept that night did not belong to a man, did it? A man could hardly fit into the wee cradle or appreciate the colorful rattle and the fluffy stuffed lion, could he? Cole was going to steal that baby. Stealing babies is what goblins did, or it was what they ought to do. It was certainly what they used to do. Cole grunted as he pulled himself up to the open window with one hand, the bundle still cradled tight in the other. Perhaps not stealing babies was what had gotten the horde into its current sad state of affairs. Chief Nud was too soft. He was too modern-minded. He was too weak. Yes, he threatened to boil their noses and braid their toes from time to time, but he so rarely followed through on those threats anymore. Too much time spent colluding with humans. That was the problem. Not enough time stealing babies. Cole slipped down from the window to the floorboards as quietly as he could. The air in the room smelled of soap and talcum powder. The chief's empathetic quirks had been tolerable while the horde was thriving, but things were different now. Cole felt it. The chief felt it. Every goblin in the horde felt it. Slowly but steadily, magic was leaving the wildwood. Slowly but steadily, the horde was dying. It was one thing to sit idly by when there was nothing to be done about it, but it was something else entirely to sit idly by when the solution was right there in their hands. The cloth bundle shifted against Cole's grip, and he felt tiny, soft fingers wrap around his thumb. He glanced down at the bundle in his hands. His throat felt dry. The changeling was the answer. A changeling was more than just a goblin who could transform to look like a human. A changeling was a living embodiment of goblin magic. It was a symbol of power and potential. It was hope. It was no coincidence that the changeling had been born just when things appeared most dire. Chief Nud had failed them, but out of his failure, the one shining light was this baby. The horde had not produced a changeling, a real changeling, not just an ordinary goblin in a wig and a dress, since the era of Menki Basilisk. Nud's father had still been chief back then. The old chief would never have questioned what to do when a changeling was born into the horde. He had been a goblin's goblin, steeped in the old ways. Now that he was gone, somebody had to see that the old ways were not forgotten. Admittedly, if Cole had been truthful, he only half remembered the old ways himself. Many of them he had never learned in the first place, but he would bleed for the bits that he did remember. Well, someone would bleed anyway, and Chief Nud and all the rest of them would thank him when it was done. Until then, he was on his own. If Cole hoped to see the ancient traditions revive, he would have to sort out the details by himself, and he would have to sort them out quickly. The squishy pink baby in the crib ahead of him was already beginning to stir. Cole hoped to whisk the little human back to the wildwood before it started crying, leaving the changeling in its stead. Then there would be a customary exchange with the fair folk. Cole would have to dig out the ancient contracts to get the details on that. He couldn't remember exactly how it all worked, but soon enough, the human baby would be on the other side of the veil and the magic returned to this one. How long should the changeling remain with the humans? It had a 3 in it, Cole thought, or maybe a 7. It was important. He remembered that much. Pesky details about numbers and ceremonies and proper procedures could wait until after he had stolen the child and returned home to glory. It wasn't about abducting children, Cole reminded himself, or about the merry havoc the little changeling would wreak in its place. It was about the good of the horde. It was about tradition. Goblin kind needed magic. Just a little, just enough. They needed to tap into ancient rituals. They needed the old ways. They needed that baby. Cole clambered up into the bassinet with his bundle and set the squirming changeling down gently in the soft bedding. It was the rarest of their kind in a generation, and Cole would see it fulfill its purpose before Nud could gild its beautiful mischief. In his hands, it looked at least mostly goblin, albeit a goblin with skin like smoke and shadows, but now it rippled and wavered like a living mirage. Its skin was speckled with stars and peeling like old wallpaper. And then it was the color of the cherrywood crib and as woolly as a child's blanket. Cole had been nervous that the transformation would not work without the proper words, but now he grinned with all his jagged teeth to see the thing's magical instincts taking over. Somewhere inside the house, a floorboard creaked. Cole froze. All of his senses instantly trained on the door in the hallway. He should have latched it. It hung ajar, and now a soft footfall was approaching. A flicker of a shadow. Cole's breath caught in his throat, and his eyes went wide. The door shuddered inward, and a fat black cat sauntered in. It glanced up at Cole, who stood motionless inside the bassinet, and then it sat down on the carpet to watch, flicking its tail and looking unimpressed. Cole breathed. It was fine. The full-grown humans were still asleep. He turned back around to bear witness to the glorious miracle of his proud and ancient culture. Two button-nosed babies with pudgy pink cheeks blinked back at him. It was done. The changeling had performed beyond Cole's wildest imagination. The impersonation was exact. Cole had only to pluck the helpless infant from the safety of its bed and secrete it away into the deep dark, leaving the doppelganger in its place. First one child smacked its tiny lips, and then the other. And the other rubbed its cheek, and then the first. Cole hesitated. He peered at the squishy little faces closest to him. He peered at the other face. Which was it? He nudged the first child with a bony knuckle. As one, the babies began to cry. Cole cringed. Up the hall, a door clicked open, and a woman's tired voice echoed down the corridor. Oh, he's probably just hungry. You sleep. I'll put him back to bed. Cole panicked. He took the closest child into his shaking hands and then dropped it and wrapped his fingers around the farthest instead. The babies wailed and kicked their chubby little legs. Cole's chest was pounding. Which one was it? He hopped from one foot to the other. The sounds of footsteps drew nearer. Which one? Which one? He glanced from the door to the children, to the door, to the children, to the door opened with a mew like a kitten. Hush, sweetie, Mama's here. Mrs. Burton cooed blurrily. The curtain flapped in the cool breeze as she crossed to the crib. Mrs. Burton froze. Mrs. Burton stared. Cole had already burst through the underbrush into the wildwood when the lamps flickered on in the house behind him. His feet were racing, his heart was thudding, his head was full, and his hands were empty. Dun, dun, dun. So that's the end of chapter 1. I'm going to go ahead and turn the page for chapter 2 just because it makes me laugh a little bit and read you maybe the first sentence. Chapter 2, twins. Annie Burton distinctly remembered giving birth to one baby. One. She had been there. She had counted 10 fingers, 10 toes, one baby. But now, twins? Okay, friends, that was the first chapter and just a hint of the second chapter of The Changeling by William Ritter. Now, this book is one of the OBOB selections, Oregon Battle of the Books. So I am going to bring up another poll question. Here's the next one, if you would like to answer. After hearing a little about this book, do you think you'll keep reading? Definitely yes, probably yes, I'm not sure, probably no, definitely no. So go ahead and see if anyone wants to answer that question. We'll give it a little bit of time. Probably yes, yay! So this book is available through Deschutes Public Library. You can get it through Hoopla and anyone can check it out. We can have 100 people check it out at the same time, so it's super available. It is also available in paper book format. I have a copy right now, so you can put that on hold to pick up at the library that you like if you prefer a paper book. And it is available through Overdrive, which I find to be the most convenient to read on an e-reader or on my phone or something like that. So there are different ways to get a hold of this book. And I have one more quick question. I'm just curious to know if anyone is on an OBOB team. So yes, no, I'm thinking about it. What's OBOB? Or something else. So I'm just wondering if anyone is on an OBOB team who came today, and feel free to answer that one. Otherwise, that is the main part of our program. In a week, on the 14th, we will be doing some crafts with things that you might have around the house that relate to this book. And then on the 21st at 3 p.m., we will be doing a book discussion. So there'll be some questions and answers, and you can do that anonymously, or you can do it via text. Some people like to show their faces and chat. Some people like just to chat in the text chat. So today's version was a webinar, which meant that I did most of the talking, and we didn't have too much Q&A or chatting from you, the attendants, but the one in 2 weeks will be a book discussion, and everyone will be allowed to chat and talk. And that is on October 21st. We will also have Sheila helping out with that one as well. So if there's anyone who needs assistance or any off-color comments or things like that, we will take care of that and watch for that. So I'm going to share the results. It looks like we have something else, not an OBOB team. I bet that's our friend Joanne, who is a wonderful teacher in Tumalo. And I'm going to go ahead and close it out. So we're 2 minutes under. Thank you for coming today. We will share this video if anyone would like to listen to that first bit of reading. Otherwise, we are all set. So thank you very much for coming today.